privileged to be here, and we usually start off with conflicts. My conflict is I'm a complete partisan in support of what we're doing here at the Methodist DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center. Other than that, I don't have any conflicts for this particular talk. It's a real privilege to give the State of the Heart and Vascular Center in 2020. I really want to call out a few people before I get started because they're absolutely critical to be able to do what we're doing. And probably the most important person is Bill Zogby, who's really my partner in crime, basically sitting on the front seat. But there are multiple other people, basically, from the administrators, basically, Brenda Campbell, Michael, who helped run this, including the changes in anesthesia, which we're seeing at the moment. And I'll talk a little bit about those, basically, as we go through and talk about the evolution, basically, of the Heart and Vascular Center. But Bill up front, Mary Daffin's the other person, basically, to call out. She chairs, basically, our governance committee and spends an enormous amount of time, basically, helping us to understand, basically, what's going on. I'm going to start actually with a slide that I showed last year because I think it's really epitomizes what has been achieved and hopefully we will continue to achieve. And I describe Methodist as a 100-year-old startup. We celebrated our 100th anniversary last year. But really, in its current state, it's really only about 10 to 12 years old. So we're really a startup academic organization. There's some seats right down the front for those of you who are brave enough to come down and sit in the front row. And so let me tell you basically why this is a 100-year-old startup. I moved down here to join Baylor 2 years before the messy medical center divorce. Don't need to go into the politics of that because it's all basically in our rearview mirror. But that happened only in 2004. And it took a few years. And, you know, I always remember Willis Hirsch. When I was at Emory, Willis Hirsch was a preeminent cardiologist who wrote The Heart. And he used to say, when you drink from the well, think about the people who dug that well. There's a lot of people basically who dug that well, and these were the three principals who were involved basically in recreating Methodist as an academic medical center. Ron Giraudo was the CEO, John Bookout basically was the chairman of the board, and Tony Gatto was the dean basically up at Cornell at that time. And we thank him really because he sent Dirk Sossman down here, who is the chief academic officer here, and essentially was the on-ground engineer who helped change and transform this into the academic medical center in partnership with those few guys. That didn't happen really that long ago. At that time, there was no PO, and I remember being offered a job, except that they said, we've never actually employed a doctor here at Methodist Hospital. But if you can hang out for about 18 months with no salary, we'll probably figure out basically, talking to Dr. Quinones and I, we'll figure out basically how we actually pay you basically after a period of time. And you know what, we're crazy enough to actually buy into this ridiculous idea, and here we are to this day. So that was the beginning, you know, at that time of the development of the physicians organization. Methodist had never employed a doctor. And now we employ, hard to keep track of what that count is, but we're probably closing in on 800 physicians who are actually employed here in that physicians organization group, headed up basically by Rob Phillips. And so basically it continued, and the Methodist journey basically into academia. Barbara Bass was one of the first chairs who was actually hired here, and she created this idea of Mighty, which we continue to benefit from this day. She was probably the first chair, and she's also departed, left us last year, and is now the dean, you know, up at GW, up in Washington. After that, of course, we created the Research Institute, and the Research Institute was, nobody even thought about it at that time. We had no research labs, and so the Research Institute basically was created, and that really is the platform that allowed research to be built. We started acquiring hospitals and building hospitals basically out in the periphery. We created this idea, we called it DICET, now it's morphed into DeBakey Education. You're going to hear a lot more about that later. And then we continued to build in the periphery. And a lot of the periphery now is the focus of the development that's occurring here at Methodist Hospital. We kind of describe it that for the first 7, 8, 9 years, it was about rebuilding downtown. And downtown, I would submit, is largely rebuilt. Bell now employs 52 cardiologists. The Department of CV Surgery employs 32 cardiovascular surgeons. We're big, and we're going to continue to grow. And that doesn't even count the number of people in private practice who participate and help run the Methodist DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center. And it will do nothing but continue to evolve. There were no departments. There were no department chairmen. Yeah, not everything's perfect. We do make some mistakes. Some people still think that was a regressive idea of building departments and having department chairs come on board. And now we have something like over 90 personal chairs, basically, that's been money that's been raised through the foundation. Outpatient center was built, basically, I think it's in 2016. Woodlands basically came online, and then we designed, when I presented this last year, we were not even in the Walter Tower. This was a vision, basically, of what we were going to create, and obviously that features, basically, in where we're going forward. And at that time, we were thinking about the development of NMED. We'll come back and talk about that a little bit later. So that's the story. The story basically is all of this has been created really in a 10-year time span. I don't think this has ever been done before. And as Methodist has evolved, so has the Heart and Vascular Center evolved. And it's a function of the people who are in this room and many people beyond this room who've allowed us to create this really unbelievable organization. And the challenge is to keep it going as robust an organization as it has been. It was a little bit them versus us and the startup mentality, and we want to keep that going and keep the energy that has been created. So now we're in the Walter Tower, and I would submit to you that this is the single best cardiovascular clinical care center that has ever been created. Eventually somebody will supersede it, but right now basically it is absolutely fantastic. 366 bed capacity, and you can see the first unit opened in August 2019. It's only really been 6 months. Hard to believe that that has occurred. It was well needed for the Heart and Vascular Center because the quality of the physical plant was really not up to where we want to be. Well, now I think it surpasses at that. And you got to think about moving an entire enterprise. Most of the floors, all of the ICUs, basically, most of the ICUs, moving that entire organization into this is a remarkable feat of organization. And it was done remarkably well. When the biggest complaint is the doors. The doors just don't open fast enough. Now, we ain't got that fixed yet. It's still a problem. Generates a lot of work for our orthopedic surgeons, because I can tell you, my shoulder's taken a blow from those doors kind of multiple times. But when that's the biggest problem, when you move a bunch of patients on VADs and on ventilators, you know, that organization was remarkable. It was rehearsed and very well run with really no problems basically moving those patients. And it's a significant part of who we are and where we're functioning. And we take great pride in touring our visitors through that tower and showing them the quality from top to bottom basically that's in there. And it's beginning, or what we've been doing in terms of raising our brand, improving it to the clinical operation, is beginning to show some benefits. And so when we look at, this is Houston Methodist, and now the preferred hospital amongst insured patients, commercially insured patients in particular. And you can see where we started. Remember, Memorial Hermann is a bigger system than we are. And you can see basically that year by year, we're gradually increasing to the point basically that we're now the preferred provider in town, competing against a bigger operation than we actually have. And you can see that compared with Memorial Hermann, and you can see where our major competitors basically down at the bottom going in the wrong direction. And overall, the preference for heart service line has increased by about 4.7% just basically in the last 12 months. Much that we complain that we don't get enough press basically in marketing out in the community, clearly what is being done, you know, is actually beginning to benefit. And it's by focusing on the day-to-day, basically blocking and tackling, do as Mark Bohm would say, just doing basically the basic things to improve quality and take care of these patients that is beginning to work in the community. We are the major preference basically for heart services amongst our competitors. And again, from left to right, it goes Houston Methodist, Memorial Hermann, Catholic Health, and then Clear Lake. And you can see basically that by and large, we are, overall preference is going up, commercial preference is going up. If you look at the cardiology market share, we can see that we're going up basically inside our area. And you can see we've gone up from 6.9 to 7%. We exceed all the others in terms of preference. And we want to continue to build on that basically as we move forward. Clearly, there's opportunity to continue to grow this. And I think basically with some of the recent additions in physicians, who I'll kind of introduce later, into the service line here, you will see that that will continue to increase. If you look in the surgical side, in the cardiovascular surgery market share, likewise, basically, we now are the preferred provider inside Houston in terms basically of patients coming here to be taken care of. And that wasn't the case basically 5-10 years ago. We're markedly improved. One of the measures of how well we're doing is what is the volume of cardiovascular imaging that's taking place. You drive the imaging, you'll see basically the other volumes tend to follow that. And I think that we are exceptionally proud of our imaging. When I talk to people around the country, I say one of the huge advantages that we have in the Heart and Vascular Center is that we own the imaging. And that's a stroke of genius, to be honest with you. By having our clinicians, Deepan Shah basically runs this, he took it over from Bill basically when he became the chair, having our clinicians be the ones basically who we interface with on taking care of patients clinically, perhaps even more importantly from a development and research standpoint, is really a remarkable feat inside the Heart and Vascular Center. It makes it easy when we're actually working basically on research projects. And you can see across the board, those volumes basically are increasing. You can also look at cath lab volumes. The volumes basically are increased with the exception of the device case volume that's occurred. And you look at the surgical volumes, and they're all going in the direction that we would like to see that. So it's great. So we're increasing the volumes. Ultimately, the question is, are we doing any good? And this is a kind of complex slide. Basically, it's what we show at our service line meeting. And you can see on the left side of the screen as you look at it is cardiology, cardiac surgery. We include thoracic, although don't really roll up inside the Heart and Vascular Center, and vascular surgery. All you really need to know is blue is good, green is okay, red ain't so hot. And so we tend to focus basically on mortality. And if you look at mortality in the cardiology and CV surgery service line has never been better than it is at the moment. Cardiology is running at a mortality index of 0.5, cardiac surgery 0.55, and vascular surgery 0.4 of expected. And so we're doing really well. Now that's the good news. Here's the bad news. It's a little bit like being a sales rep. If you did good this year, you got to do much, much better next year. So you got to figure out basically how you thread that needle. You can't be so good that it's impossible to be asked to be better next year. But, you know, I showed this slide to somebody and they said, you know what, that's really impressive about Methodist. You're very good, but you want to be better. And so that's the reason that these benchmarks continue to be set to be a little bit more challenging for us to actually hit it yet next year. We may get there, we'll try to get there, but even if you fall a little bit short of what's being asked, you're still going to be in that excellent range. And so a little bit more is expected next year, but 2019 from a mortality standpoint was great. So let's talk about the red and deal with the red parts basically up front. We don't do a particularly good job in length of stay. And so, well, you could argue that, well, you know, that's why we've got such great mortality. That doesn't really ring true. And, you know, length of stay is also one of the measurements of quality. And it's something that we all need to focus on is not that we basically remove care from the patient, but we can clearly do a better job in terms of the organization and helping to get patients basically out of the hospital, albeit in protecting the quality of outcomes basically at the same time. There are too many highlights basically from a public relations standpoint, you know, that occurred this year. I think George, I don't know if George is here, George Kovacic does a really good job. He's a name that everybody should know. When you've got a story, call George. Basically, he knows everybody in town and can actually go ahead basically and promote that. And this is just a sample of some of the PR highlights. The marketing department basically largely focused basically on consumers, and they've kind of ramped up their game in terms of getting these kind of publications out to the patients who are out there and consumers. There's an AFib campaign. We're focused on adult congenital heart. And remember that this is a very rapidly growing portion of the population. More patients exist with adult congenital heart disease than the pediatric population because the pediatric cardiologists and surgeons have done such a good job in keeping those patients alive. But the competition is coming for that. Texas Children's, put Children's in inverted commas going forward, wants to get into the adult congenital business. And so we don't basically have a monopoly in this by any stretch of the imagination. It's one of the reasons that we've opted to focus on marketing to try and grow that volume. These are very complex patients. And we got Dr. McGilvery here, who's an expert in this, Huey Lynn, and we'll introduce his new partner to you basically just a little bit later. Consumer highlights basically are out there. We're increasingly focusing now on national physician marketing campaign to try and improve our reputational score. Our reputational score in US News and World Report is gradually increasing, and we think it's a function of a lot of the things that are going on, but this is how the marketing department basically is trying to help that. When you go to ACC, STS, you'll actually see a lot of these digital boards. We're actually actively working on getting our name basically in the brochures, on the billboards around the convention centers, for example, and pushing things out basically in social media. And one of the things we really want to thank, there's a lot of people in here who've taken to social media. It's the new medium, and it's one of the areas that we ignore basically at our peril. We don't ignore it. We're actually very active in social media, and I want to thank everybody who participates in that. And I know some of you are going to be tweeting out, you know, as we talk right now. So everybody likes to see their name in lights. There's a lot of people basically up there. It's the young people who help drive this, with the exception of Bill and I. We consider ourselves young at heart when it comes basically to Twitter, and we're trying to drag some of the oldies basically into getting a little bit more involved in that. Isn't that right, Mahesh? All right. So we've kind of gone from, you know, as I say, I describe it as the cake downtown is rebaked. Sure, there's going to be pieces of icing on the cake that we got to put on there. And I'm going to show you some of the icing that was put on top of that cake this year and some of the recruits that we made. But a lot of the focus is now turning to the system. And at the system hospitals, we are blessed with the fact that when you go out to our system hospitals, you don't need to be embarrassed by a shoddy system hospital. In fact, a lot of them pushed, until we had the new tower built, a lot of them had better facilities than we've got. And so increasingly, we look across the system. We now have cardiologists across the system. We've got CV surgeons now active in basically every one of our system hospitals. And that is the real focus of recruitment that is actually occurring at the moment. And so the focus basically, this was from 2019, was trying to increase the collaboration. And we're going to talk about some of the examples that have occurred in condensing some of the databases that we're running quality on, STS database, running basically quality management, and increasingly starting to look at how do we manage purchasing basically across the system. So what's been done? So that basically was where we're going. We also started the System Nursing Conference, very popular. A lot of people came to that, and the second one will actually occur this year. So a lot of the focus on the system, I got to thank Steve Little and Mike Reardon for doing this, has been on growing the TAVR program. Remember, basically, the TAVR story is a really good one to actually talk about, because there was no TAVR probably 7 or 8 years ago. We got involved in the clinical trials. Our team, you know, the team basically at that time was Steve, Neil Kleiman, and Mike Reardon were the team of people who took on saying, we ought to be involved in doing this. We got involved in the core valve trial. We were the top enrollers in the United States. That led really to Mike Reardon being asked to be a national PI on the next trial that occurred. That's the pinnacle of what you can be with these commercial trials. The visibility that you get from that is absolutely massive. And these trials run a course, and eventually they get to the point basically where they're going to be commercialized, and we're going to be selling these products, and then companies have to figure out how they're going to train the entire population of the United States who all want to be involved in implanting TAVR. And guess where the best training center in the world is? Happens to be, you know, within about less than 100 yards from here, up in Mighty. And so what happens is we get visibility in these trials. You get visibility when the data is being presented. Multiple New England Journal publications have come out of this. Then you go into commercial mode. We want to be the training center. Somebody else pays to bring physicians. About a month ago, we had 60 cardiologists and surgeons sitting in the RI auditorium, watching our teams coming out of the Walter Tower in the state-of-the-art hybrid rooms. And that's really how we're going to change the reputational score. You have to have differentiated programs that you can talk about and that will interest people. We can't basically do another 200 PCIs or coronary bypasses and change that reputational score at all. Sure, we want that volume, but it has to be highly differentiated programs. And I think that you'll see in the recruitment that occurred that basically is actually happening. So a lot of the changes basically have taken place. Our priorities really were focused on valve program expansion. There was a very programmatic design basically on how they were going to be brought on board. And you can see that the centers that are already up basically are Sugarland, and we'll show you a little bit about that. Next up is going to be West, Woodlands, and then there's got to be a decision basically down the line about what we're going to do with our other system hospitals. And maybe that this is not going to happen in every hospital, but I can tell you that everybody comes here, gets trained. Once they get up to speed, then we basically start rolling it out, and we're very proud basically of what has actually happened. And this is just an example of what it's called the roadmap to TAVR, how we're going to basically manage this and make sure that quality and outcomes are actually maintained. And this was the first outside the medical center one in Methodist. You can see Dr. Koo and Marvin Atkins. I guess they think Dr. Koo's a surgeon too. So surgeons always get the priority in the billing here. And so Houston Methodist surgeon performs Fort Bend's first cardiac valve. But it's very, very much basically a team effort that's actually going to occur in performing this. And so along with this, we've also expanded our brand. We've now agreed to have the Houston Methodist DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center. Used to exist here. It's now basically rolling out basically across the system as we've gained a little bit basically more of supervision and control over quality. We don't want to change the brand by marginalizing quality. So here's Dr. Zogby in action. He's actually interviewing somebody after Grand Rounds. The reason I'm introducing this is because one of the other things we did last year was open our studio. Doesn't every heart and vascular center have a studio around the country? So why am I introducing this? Because the way I used to do this was I'd ask all the division chiefs to give me slides, and I'd condense them and I'd talk about them. You know, the stroke of true genius as a leader, when you actually figure out how to make other people do the work that you will then get credit for. So instead of doing that, what I did was basically bring them all up to the studio and say, you talk about it. Now, what I didn't tell them is this is going to be, we're going to introduce a new topic. It's going to be the Heart and Vascular Center Academy Awards. So we're going to put these guys and gals up here, and then maybe we'll basically get you all to vote on who's basically got the best person. I know what the answer is going to be before we even start, but this is what we're going to do, is have, you know, the leadership actually tell you their story about what's happened in their program this year. So let's hear from the Adult Congenital Heart Program, and headed up basically by Dr. Lynn. Well, you know, the measure of the man is he didn't do this. He actually delegated it to his new partner.
I'm Valeria Duarte. I'm an adult congenital cardiologist. This is an exciting time for our adult congenital heart disease program. This program has been growing tremendously over the last several years, and I'm excited to have joined this effort. There are very few centers in the world that can offer the complexity of care that the Houston Methodist can to our patients. This is the right place to care for these very high complexity patients who need support from very advanced multidisciplinary team and with the highest technology that medicine has to offer today to have successful outcomes.
All right, so that's a little review from our new partner and a little bit about the Adult Congenital Heart Program. Well, the other component of this happens to be Tom McGilvery, but he carries multiple hats. He's got a big head, so we can put multiple hats basically on there, and you can't put too many hats basically on there because he's the chief of the cardiac surgery and the thoracic transplant, and also basically he is the adult congenital heart surgeon. So how about we hear from Tom?
Cardiac surgery and thoracic transplant surgery. And I'm happy to give you an update from our division. The DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center stands on three strong pillars, that being patient care, research and innovation, and education. And I'd say all three of our pillars are standing strong. Our patient care has been excellent. As we all know, there's increasing scrutiny on how we deliver care, not only its quality, but its value. We have a whole team of not only surgeons, but administrators that are examining all of the processes of our care to make sure that we continue to maintain a high quality of care at a high value. We are in thoracic transplant. We have excellent numbers of patients transplanted, and our outcomes are outstanding. We have recently had some of the best one-year survival outcomes of any program in the country for both our heart transplant and lung transplant programs. Research and innovation, we have really led the way in transcatheter aortic valve replacement, led by, from the surgical side, Dr. Mike Reardon, who has done an amazing job in taking care of our patients and making TAVR the standard of care for patients with aortic stenosis. He is an internationally recognized leader, as is our team. We're also starting up, along with one of my colleagues, Alpesh Shah, the XyloCore study. We will be injecting vascular growth factor into patients with ischemic heart disease who don't have any transcatheter or surgical options. The last pillar, education, I would say is the most exciting in the last year. We have recently been approved to restart our ACGME cardiothoracic surgery training program. So we'll be able to train generations of cardiothoracic surgeons for years to come.
So thank you, Tom. here's another program, Dr. Omala, I saw him hiding in the back. So Dr. Zogby basically recruited Dr. Omala to come here and start basically our PET CT program. And you can see this is month by month, the increase in the number basically of studies that are being done. This is something that we've really not had in the past. He is also an internationally known figure basically in this arena. And the kind of procedures which he can perform are demonstrated here. I'm particularly interested in the vascular graft infections, and what he's done is partnered with one of my partners, Dr. Rahimi. They submitted a grant to Siemens, and that's one of the funded grants from the Siemens Methodist relationship that's been very important basically in going forward. So well, it's great really having you here. It's great having you at conferences and having your input in it. The other person basically who is a huge component of what we're doing in the Heart and Vascular Center is Dr. John Cook. And so the two people that I work most with are John and Bill Zogby. And John came here from Stanford, has really taken over the Department of Cardiovascular Sciences, has really kind of taken this, the basic science to a level that they really didn't think was really achievable. And so he gives us the kind of academic credibility that we need in order to be able to compete as an academic organization. So John, why don't you tell us a little bit about what
Alan
you've
has
done.
asked me to talk today about the basic science program in the DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center. In our Department of Cardiovascular Sciences, we have 2 centers now with 52 scientific personnel, supported by $17 million in external funding. And last year we published 45 papers. Our Center for Cardiovascular Regeneration is meant to generate great ideas that transform cardiovascular care. And I'll be sharing a few of those publications with you in just a moment. Our Center for Bioinformatics and Computational Biology, or CB Squared, is directed by Kai-Fu Chen. He has a great group of bioinformaticians working with him to help us sort through the vast trove of biological data and help us glean insights from that. Now, we have 7 established faculty. We have 5 junior faculty or tethered faculty, and we also have an adjunct faculty member, Dr. Rod Pettigrew, he was dean of the NMED program. And in addition, we have 3 lecturers that help us with our teaching. We have 2 new faculty that we recruited last year. Dr. Francisco Altamirano from UT Southwestern comes to us with an American Heart Association Scientist Development Grant that got the best score in the country. His interest is in atrial arrhythmias and heart failure. Dr. Ruli Gao we stole away from MD Anderson. She's a pioneer in single-cell genomics, a rising star that's going to help us with our single-cell characterizations. Now for some of the research highlights, we started off the year last year with a bang, a paper in Nature, a paper in Science, and from Kai-Fu Chen and Long-Ho Fang, respectively. Long-Ho's paper showed that a direct link between cholesterol and white blood cells, specifically the protein he's characterizing, seems to enhance hematopoiesis. Another really interesting paper from Li Lai showing that a glycolytic shift is required for changes in cell fate, directly linked to histone acetylation and chromatin conformation. And then we've got some really interesting data coming out of our heart failure working group. This is a really nice collaboration between the basic scientists, the computational biologists, and our heart failure team, basically suggesting that there's a link between vascular recovery and heart failure recovery in our LVAD patients and in our animal model. That idea, the data that we've generated so far, garnered an NIH award, 7th percentile, and will be getting funded this year and for the next 4 years from that NIH grant. You're going to be hearing more from this crew in the future. The RNA therapeutics program is really the first in the country academic program to generate clinical grade RNA. We've been generating research grade RNA for clients around the world. This year with funding from CPRIT and also a nice 7-figure contract from a local gene therapy company to license our technology, we've been able to push the progress of this team led by Roman Sokoverson, and we'll be generating our first clinical grade product this year. We also increased the profile of our group and established some new collaborations with several meetings that we had last year that were all very well attended and successful. And many grants and awards the faculty and the postdocs received last year, too numerous to mention, but you can see that in our annual report. And finally, what we're doing could not be done without the support of our administrative team led by Susmitha Gaddy. And thank you, Susmitha, and the team for helping us do our work. Well, thanks, Alan, for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about our basic science program. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Susmitha. I think one of the nice things about a day like this is it's an opportunity to look horizontally across the Heart and Vascular Center. We tend to, focus on cardiology or CV surgery, and I'm not doing justice to all of these different programs, but it is an opportunity to show all of the programs or most of the programs, so we all have an idea of some of the activity that's going on basically across the Heart and Vascular Center. So next up, basically, was a new program in cardiovascular prevention and wellness. Now, you probably all know this guy already because he's been pretty visible since he came here. But Karam's going to tell us really about what he wants to achieve.
Vascular prevention and wellness at DeBakey Heart and Vascular. I'm so delighted to have joined the Houston Methodist family coming from Yale University with combined goals of developing the nation's premium preventive cardiology service line that could advance DeBakey's clinical education, research, as well as community missions. Our clinical program serves as a system-wide resource that supports high-risk patients, not only with established, but those who have not yet declared themselves with heart disease. The approach of our clinical program is embedded in an extensive, but yet simple precision medicine principle of providing the right medical care for the right person at the right time. That has a high-tech, but at the same time, a high-touch approach so that we could understand each patient's unique situations, risks, and personalized need. In our clinical program, we have adopted a stepwise approach where we start with an in-depth assessment of early cardiovascular disease using advanced cardiac imaging. We supplement that with enhancing our understanding of the disease biology with focused biomarker testing. Now, all of this provides our team with the rationale that could develop a personalized care plan that could be carried out by our multidisciplinary team. Although many of you, after a certain age, are candidates for cardiovascular risk assessment, we believe there are few particular groups who are high risk, who should be prime candidates for a preventive cardiology consultation early on, especially somebody who has a personal history of cardiovascular disease before age 60. If you have a strong family history of heart attack, stroke, or peripheral arterial disease, somebody with severely elevated cholesterol levels, difficult to manage blood pressures, diabetes and metabolic syndrome, and certain conditions like CKD, rheumatoid arthritis, erectile dysfunction, who are prone to increased risk of early cardiovascular disease.
So I think we can probably give him that office down in the vascular surgery service, because that kind of reflects all of the patients. We've really not done a good job in managing the preventive aspects of this. And so this is an area which is often underserved. Underserved because it doesn't necessarily come with huge reimbursement like when we're doing procedures. And so I think it's really good that the institution supported us in bringing Dr. Nasir down here, because it's something that we need, and he will be a huge influence on all of our cardiovascular patients. The heart failure team continues to grow. This is an example, basically, of the heart failure team. Again, Tom McGill already kind of preempted this. The results from the heart transplants and lung transplants here are the best in the nation. And so we want to see this continue to grow. I think you're going to see that, I'll introduce later some of the surgeons, and I should say physicians and cardiologists who've come over from Texas Heart can help to increase basically the volumes that are coming through this heart failure program, and we want to welcome them. This is an example basically of where we are in terms of basically the outcomes in these patients, and it's really second to none. This is an incredibly busy service. They're amongst the hardest working people that you see because they're in here at night taking care of these very, very sick patients. In terms of vascular, Eric, we're going to hear from Eric.
2019 was a good year for the vascular surgery division. We saw about a 20% growth across the system for vascular procedures. This was largely due to growth in the community hospitals, as the main campus was relatively static. We've also added new faculty to the system and had 3 graduates this past year from our vascular surgery fellowship and residency. We had 2 residents graduate, one of whom joined us, Thomas Lowe. Matt Bennett went back to the Northwest, and Dong Lee, our fellow, went to the east side of the country. We added the 4 faculty across the system. Thomas again joined us up at the Woodlands. Sarah Idekin joined us at Methodist Baytown. Joseph Noem came back and rejoined the group and is now working down in the Clear Lake area. And Eddie Moats has come and joined us from Galveston, is now working in the northwest part of town at Willowbrook with Richard Lee. Research has been very active for the group as well. We've been involved in multiple device trials and industry trials, as well as retrospective reviews, and in fact, investigator-initiated prospective trials and basic research as well. This resulted in 23 publications this past year in 2019 alone. This is kind of across the spectrum for vascular disease, a lot of imaging studies, new devices, new procedures, new drugs, and robotics was playing a big theme in last year's publications as well. This was also across aortic disease, peripheral arterial disease, and lots of dialysis access. 2020 is looking like a good year. We have multiple recruits that are ongoing, new faculty that are getting ready to start, and new trainees that are incoming and ongoing interviews. We look forward to new trials, new procedures, new patients. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Let me move on to anesthesia, because there's some major changes occurring basically in the structure of the department here, and also basically in the personnel. I think Dr. Naples was the first, and up until recently, the only chair of the CV anesthesia group, or the anesthesia group would be a more appropriate term. And we really want to thank Dr. Naples. He's always a guy who's been sitting in the front row when I give this, and he really he's been an incredible partner for all of us. Dr. Quinones, followed by Dr. Zogby, myself, in running the operation room, running the cath lab, critical care, and he'll be sorely missed. So I just want to, in public, say thank you very much, Dr. Naples, for your contribution. He was replaced in terms of the CV anesthesia group by Marty Giesecke. He goes, his real name is Noel, but everybody calls him Marty. And we're going to hear from Marty just in 1 minute. To give you an idea of some of the structural changes that are taking place, our own Faisal Masood has been announced as the medical director for the Center of Critical Care. That's about 320 ICU beds. If you think about the Walter Tower, it's got about 300. It's like running an ICU, the scale basically of the Walter Tower. And so obviously this is an increase in focus. He's going to be responsible for that. We don't want him to be totally biased in terms of cardiovascular disease, but we do expect him to be a little biased. And yeah, I think that we can hopefully that's going to actually happen. Dr. Randy Stedman, a few of you have met, but he's the new chair of anesthesia, basically, and Marty's going to tell us a little bit about how this changes are going to affect us and introduce him.
In this anesthesiology update, I will discuss the 3 topics you see on this slide, starting with new leadership. Dr. Randy Stedman is the incoming chair of the Department of Anesthesiology and Critical Care at Houston Methodist Hospital. Dr. Stedman comes to us from UCLA, where he has been a longtime physician leader. His area of clinical expertise is anesthesia for liver and abdominal organ transplants. He's also renowned in the field of simulation and was the founding director of the UCLA Simulation Center. His expected start date is March 3rd, 2020. What about collaboration with the Walter Tower Operating Room? Our department works with the Walter Tower Operating Room on multiple projects, 2 of which are shown here. I will focus on-time starts. No longer is there a grace period of 5 minutes after arrival in the operating room. So if a patient is in the operating room after 7:30, that case is considered a late start. Our goal is 80% on-time starts. For December 2019, we were 74% on-time starts in the Walter Tower Operating Room. What I am most proud of, though, is that 2 of the 38 late starts were caused by anesthesia. So in global, only 2 of 145 cases in the month of December were late starts caused by the Department of Anesthesiology. Finally, let's talk about contact with learners. From July 2019 through June 2020, there will be a total of 246 rotators within the department. The majority of those are cardiovascular anesthesiology and cardiovascular ICU fellows and residents. However, we have a good number of student registered nurse anesthetists, and we are also proud of our Texas A&M medical students. Thank you, Dr. Lumsden, for the opportunity to provide you with this anesthesiology update.
Well, thanks, Marty. So Marty really is going to be the lead anesthesiologist for the Methodist DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center. Faisal basically will focus on the critical care side, and Marty, basically in conjunction with Dr. Stedman, he gets here, will be the people we're going to interact with. I also want to do a couple other things. Congratulations. Congratulations to our own Stuart Solomon. He's the president-elect for the medical staff. You know, I don't know if he knows what he's getting into in doing that. I think he does. But it's great to have somebody who is part of us really taking over what is a major leadership role in the organization. There's also been a number of other cardiologists basically have now moved their primary home from institutions on either side of us coming in to actually work in the Methodist DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center. We are an open staff hospital and will continue to be an open staff hospital. And part, we see, of a lot of the accomplishments that have been achieved here, I think particularly basically Dr. Reisner sitting here is on the first medical director of the Heart and Vascular Center. And we really want to encourage people in private practice to come join this organization. We want them to feel involved. And I had the privilege actually working with Dr. George basically up in the operating room 2 o'clock in the morning, mind you, basically on Sunday night. So hopefully we can actually find a time that's a little bit more hospitable when we can kind of get to know one another and work together. But these are people, we've focused on people who deliver high quality care, who are mission driven like we are. We want to advance basically what we're doing, and we want, it's a big tent, and we want to encourage people to participate in this. So thank you all basically for coming on board, and congratulations to Stuart. Let me talk a little bit about the structural heart program. Basically Mike stepped up.
Surgeons here in the Heart and Vascular Center. Dr. Lumsden has asked me to say a few words about our clinical and research work. Last year, we continued our work with our heart tumor program. Dr. Ed Chan presented both our primary pulmonary artery sarcomas and our paragangliomas of the heart, two of the biggest series in the literature, again, leading to several presentations and multiple publications. Even more importantly, our structural heart team has continued to do exceedingly well. We represent national PIs on 5 different TAVR trials, executive committees on 7 different TAVR trials, and study chairs on 2 different TAVR trials. I'm also on the executive committee of 3 different mitral valve trials and 1 of the tricuspid trials. This has led to, at least me personally, 54 peer-reviewed publications and 95 publications nationally or internationally covering 15 states and 5 countries. So the flag of our structural heart team is being raised over and over again. I would also point out that we were involved in the very first transvenous transseptal total chordal repair of degenerative MR in Bogota, Colombia, which is out in JACC intervention. So I think we're again setting the standard for structural heart disease, and I look at 2020 as going to be an even more exciting and busy year.
Thanks, Mike. So this is that publication. This is a patient, a case that was actually done in an animal. No, first in man. That went from animal to first in man very rapidly, basically outside the US. And this is basically fixing mitral regurg by putting in new chordae through a transseptal approach. And so this just got published, hot from the press, February 2020. So congratulations, Mike. Again, the model has often been in the past that you built a mountain and then you try to kill everybody else who came up with your mountain because it was our mountain. Our model basically is a little different. You know, you build the right mountain, everybody should be coming up after it. Now, TAVR is an example of this. And so people are coming up the mountain. Our job is that when you get to the top of the mountain, they go, well, what happened to those Methodist DeBakey Heart and Vascular? Oh, there's the other mountain. The next mountain is mitral valve, okay? And that mountain is being built right now. And so we're looking over the horizon. We're in commercialization for TAVR, but we're basically in the research and development part, basically, of mitral valve repair. And that's the area we're going to be focusing on. You're going to hear a lot more about for the next few years. And you can see really what the TAVR and mitral clip volume growth has occurred. And this is supported basically by research. You can see basically the New England Journal publication on the left, and you can see that Ron Bill Zogby chaired basically the working group looking at the guidelines for evaluation of valvular regurgitation. These are the opportunities that come basically with the visibility and having the right people here. We wanted to introduce you. Unfortunately, we lost Colin Barker. That's the bad news. The good news is we recruited Dr. Gold, who's now really an integral part basically of that team, and welcome on board. From an EP world, again, they continue to rock and roll in terms of their volume. It's a very busy group. The highlight clearly is the completion basically of the vein of Marshall trial. I don't think anybody understands the kind of work that goes on to testing in an animal, this concept of vein of Marshall infusion. Then basically the idea, I think you got to be half crazy to be honest with you, and certainly Dr. Valderrabino fulfills that bill pretty well. Where are you, Miguel? Because before we started, I said to him, if you knew then what you knew now, would you have done this? Because putting together a trial, raising the money, running a multi-center trial is just an enormous feat, not just for the investigator, but the people like Susmita and her team who actually have to support that. So congratulations. This guy's, he's got double billing. He's in Jordan's presentation, and he gets another picture here. But again, building the basic science that goes to support that. New recruits, can't go through them all individually, basically in cardiology. Great additions, some of them you've already met. I want to talk about big programs. We know about the Translational Imaging Center. I've got to give Dirk Sossman, who's sitting in the front row, enormous credit for this. This is a game changer, really, for the Heart and Vascular Center. It allows us to partner with a company that we had partnered with in the past, but now it takes it really to a different level. The one thing we haven't done is built this multi-modality imaging suite. And so, here we are. We're going to lay this one out here. I want to be here next year showing you pictures of this, not talking about the vision of what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. I understand it's been funded, and we have the space basically available. This is a MR, biplanar imaging suite, and an angio suite basically all built into one. So my promise is that I'm going to show you a picture of this basically when we talk about it next year. And so this relationship here, again, last year I took the slide, now the 7 Tesla scanner is in there. We're starting to basically do 7T imaging. There's very little in cardiovascular imaging in 7T. These are the projects, multiple projects that have been funded. I want to focus on one. Huey Lynn sent me this. This is just an example of what happens when you put basically the engineers from a company along with the physicians building a robotically driven ICE catheter that will continue to self-center and look basically at really whatever you want to tell it to focus. So these basically are moving along basically very nicely. If you want to know more about it, talk to Huey. Let me start finishing off and talk about the DeBakey Education Studios. You've kind of already seen what it does, but what we're really just showing you is how we use this internally. But there's a big opportunity beyond that. These are the list of courses that we are running, in 1 year, and that's a vast number of people that we're actually bringing through this organization. And you can see, 90 courses, all of these different kind of people, and part of this is marketing. Again, this is one of the things that we want to bring in, and Dr. Zogby changed the direction of Heart and Vascular Center Grand Rapids. Bring in the world's experts. Show them around Methodist. It's impossible to explain who we are and what we are to people who've not been here. But they've been here, they see the organization, they meet our faculty, they got it at that point in time. And so with Bill's guidance, we changed direction in terms of bringing in superstars. If you look next week, Kim Eagle is basically talking about acute aortic syndromes, and he was the guy who basically founded IRAD, probably knows more about aortic disease than anybody else. And these are just examples basically of the courses that we're running. A lot of them are industry sponsored. Here's where we're going. Here's what the studio is going to be used for. We're going to build a webcast series that we're going to launch. We're going to broadcast out of here every afternoon, Monday through Thursday. Guys don't want to work in late on a Friday night, so we'll give them the Friday off. And we want to build a webcast series that has it's programmed over the course of a month, so it's not too onerous. And we basically decide what these are going to be. So, for example, we're going to do one on aortic talk. Dr. Cook's going to do one at the cutting edge of cardiovascular sciences. The one I'm really looking forward to is the CV sorority, sisterhood in surgery and cardiology. And we're going to start off with Linda. Linda, with permission, she'll let me show this picture. She's our partner who's pregnant and is going to deliver soon. And so one of the topics is going to be pregnancy in physicians, in surgeons and cardiologists. What are the challenges you got to actually do? I think that's going to knock it out of the park. And so just give you an example of what this will sound like.
Welcome to CV Now, a podcast from Houston Methodist DeBakey CV Education. Each week, we'll be introducing you to fascinating people.
The voice is George, the guy who's got the headphones back here, but he's got the right voice for it.
Interviews of the experts by the experts. I'm your host, George Tripsis.
All right, George, and so that we can theme that and basically roll from that. We've used the studio to produce a lot of live webcasts. The one at the top really is Mahesh doing Percival Valve broadcast to Doha, basically DeBakey High School in Doha and the DeBakey High School here. And it was hosted by Tom McGilvery and Steve Igo basically sitting in our studio. It's the way we can get our message out there. Pumps and Pipes continues to evolve, and one of the parts of that really is community outreach. And what we've arranged to do is called First Monday. First Monday at lunchtime, we're going to broadcast out of the studio into HISD. And we kicked this off. This was the first one that we did. We hosted it out of the studio, so it's hosted by us, Methodist DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center. But we linked in the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. We had David Alexander from the Aerospace Department at Rice hosting it, along with the superintendent for the HISD. And we taught, and it's a way of providing education basically into our schools. And we're going to be looking for people to help volunteer who are going to actually do it. It won't always be focused on medicine, but it will always be hosted, out of the studio. Pumps and Pipes outreach has continued. This is from yesterday. And one of the things that was done is the so-called ChemE challenge with local high schools. And what they were asked to do was build a car driven by a chemical reaction that would drive, how many feet was it, Steve? 50 feet or 100 feet? They had to do the math, to drive, to basically build a battery that would drive that car, and he had to stop it basically on the line. There's the target. And so this is part basically of our community outreach program that we can actually help and give back to the community. We are incredibly well off in terms of our resources and what we've got. And the STEM education program that we've built basically around pumps and pipes basically is pretty remarkable. Steve Igo deserves a lot of the credit for that. And Bill Klein, who helped me start Pumps and Pipes, basically hosted that. The YouTube channel, hope you all basically are subscribers to that because it is the face, the outward going face of our organization. And the people who run DeBakey CV Education are really the ones who facilitate that. And so we're going to show you some of these stats. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about this, and we'll show you this at the end. I want you at the end to come up and have a look at it. Right now, we got to get you to come here before we kind of put you on there and make you look good. What we've built here, we call it Studio in a Box, right here. And we'll show you it at the end, actually, show how it works. In fact, you want to turn it on now, and we'll show you how this works. We're going to be able to, if you choose an expert from some part of the world, they just got to have internet, we're going to close this thing up, ship it to you, you open it up, we control the uplink, we control the video, we control the lighting, so you actually make it look good. That's important. I tried this from a hotel room in DC. Well, man, I don't look good at the best of times, but I look like Frankenstein, basically, the lighting that's on here. So that vanity, personal vanity, was the driver to try and do something different. And so this is now basically our Studio in a Box. And they can actually, they're going to show you how to do what this will actually look like, if I'm smart enough to show you. And so the idea will be we ship this to whoever you want to interview, or we want to link in, automatically links into our studio. And Steve, you can host people basically from around the world, as long as there's actually a little basically uplink built into this, so we can try to control the transmission to some extent. And so that's going to be the next step in moving DeBakey Education and making it kind of a national brand. The YouTube outreach has been pretty remarkable. This is the kind of the world coverage. Remember, China doesn't get basically any YouTube, so there's a big gap there. But Mahesh was in Shanghai, Beijing, and a guy comes up and said, "Hey, Dr. Ramchandani." I said, "Well, do I know you?" He says, "No, but I know you." And he takes a little hard drive out of his pocket and says, "You know what this is?" I said, "No." He says, "This is Methodist in my pocket." Pretty good name. He would download all the stuff in Afghanistan, move into China, probably selling it. A lot smarter than we are from that standpoint. But it was essentially a way basically of doing this. And you can see what that viewership, ignore the downside, that's only part of the year. It took us probably 4 years to get 1 million views. Last year we got another 1 million views. Today we will hit 500,000 views basically in the last 2 months. So this thing is going up exponentially. And we're trying to leverage the work that you folks are basically doing. And the interesting thing is that India basically is very high up there in terms of basically its viewership. I figure that's just your family who's watching this from over there. The journal continues to rock and roll under Dr. Quinones' leadership, and these are the issues which we published last year. I want to talk about future directions because I'm very proud of this. I learned about robotics from Miguel Valderrama. We got involved and had a leadership position in bringing this to approval through the FDA by running the trial here. Now what we've done basically start working, and this is the opportunity, the other guys talk about, working with Gavin Britz, because what's happening here is that the team of people who've been working together on this basically are Gavin, Alpa Shah, Neil Kleiman, in helping to develop remote catheter-based intervention. We don't need to connect to these robots, we can connect wirelessly. That means you can move this. And the folks on the right basically are Thomas Lowe, who's up at the Woodlands, and Paul Cunningham up at the Woodlands. They are going to be the site by which we're going to do the first remote intervention. All done basically by the team down here. We'll start off with something low risk like the lower extremity, but we believe that this may be the future in terms of remote catheter-based intervention for stroke. It is a huge national problem. There is no obvious answer to it, but if we can build a stroke network with robots positioned so that somebody can get access into the carotid, this is what the setup actually looks like. This is bottom right is navigating microcatheters in there, then this is another thing that we can really drive forward in the future. In the future, I also want to give a shout out to Homer. We've built the Center for Rapid Device Translation. Just to give you an example, this is one of the projects that's come out of this, working basically with John, with Christoph, with the imaging, Eric Peden, testing basically this new device basically in venous anastomosis, or the anastomosis for fistulas. And that's one of the ways we can drive this forward. So right now it's been non-controversial. Now I'm going to step into the controversies to some extent. Now what we're looking at is the virtual ICU. What I want to say to you is we're moving into the virtual ICU. This is all hardware has all been installed. You'll see it basically in the CCU and the CV ICU. There are anxieties associated with this. That's normal that we have anxieties. I started off showing you how the outcomes are spectacular at the moment. We don't want to violate this. But there are many advantages basically of the virtual ICU. For example, I can remote in, even if I'm out of town, and see my patient, and talk to my patient, and be in front of my patient. If a resident basically goes and sees a patient at night, we can remote in and actually see the patient. That's something that I don't think we appreciate, that it's not just a virtual intensivist remotely who's going to do that, but we can actually use these platforms. So it's coming. The infrastructure basically is being built, and we are going to step into this. Basically, we have identified a group basically in CV surgery who are going to be part of that transition team. Basically, Bill's going to identify a group of people in cardiology who are going to be part of that transition team, because we need to engage in this and we need to manage it, and we won't go fully operational until we're sure basically that we can do this safely. We think this overlay basically of this being able, somebody who's available at any time has huge advantages. We've got to mitigate the downside, maintain those outcomes that we've got, and work basically with these teams to actually introduce the ICU. So I'm going to close really with a couple of slides and an announcement, actually. So this kind of is our setup. It's second to none. I think that we've really, in the past few years, built the most advanced cardiovascular clinical center that currently exists. Somebody knows something better than what we've got? Let me know. It is immediately adjacent to the most advanced training center that exists anywhere in the world, in the form basically of Mighty. It is overlaid by the most advanced cardiovascular imaging that I think has ever been created. And that is supported now basically with this relationship basically where we have internal grants, we have on-site personnel from Siemens basically, who research personnel basically who help us on a daily basis. We're completely linked from an audiovisual standpoint. We can show people what's going on in the cath lab, we can show them what's going on in the operating room. And that allows us to record cases, we can edit these cases, and we put these cases basically up on the YouTube channel. It all works together. And we've built the most extensive cardiovascular video library that exists. And it's just getting going, and it's going to continue to get better. So what on earth are we going to do for an encore? Well, and what's different here is it's all on one campus. You can go to other places and they've got pieces of this. I always pick on New York Presbyterian, great organization. The research center is an hour away through Manhattan to go over to New Jersey to the Skirville Center. And it's run by two guys who came out of Methodist Hospital. Isn't that right, Al? Juan Granada heads it up. He worked basically in Al's lab. And Greg Kaluza was the other guy. He worked in Al's lab. We lost them because of the transition that was occurring with Baylor and uncertainty at that time. They run probably the biggest cardiovascular research center that exists in the world at the moment, and they're all basically come out of Houston. So the other part of this last year, because I showed this slide, was really the development of NMED. This is another piece, it's a big piece of icing. They probably would resent the fact that I'm talking about this as icing. This is a pretty big cake, to be honest with you. And it's headed up by a guy called Rod Pettigrew. Rod Pettigrew is a cardiologist. I worked with him at Emory. He started off life as a physicist, and then he decided he wanted to be a doctor, and then he wanted to be a cardiologist, then he got interested in MR, and then he ran one of the imaging divisions of the NIH, and now he's down here running NMED, and he wants to build a heart-specific MRI scanner. And so I called him last night and said, hey, I'm going to talk about you. And, can you come and be? And he said, no, I can't come today. And he said, well, he's not. I kind of resent that fact. I said, well, because we are going to talk about the Texas A&M system expansion and the announcement of 2 new buildings. The scale of the presence in the medical center is about to increase massively from Texas A&M. And the chancellor is going to be here and announce it at 11 o'clock. I said, Rod, did you guys do this because you knew I was giving the Heart and Vascular Center grand rounds? Are you just piggybacking basically on what I'm going to say at the Heart and Vascular Center? So he denied it was anything to do with this. But this is an example of what will take us to the next level. And I would encourage everybody here to interact with these the students, medical students who are coming into this. They're all engineers. First class started in July. We started off with 30. I think it's going to scale up to somewhere between 50 and 60. They are all basically have to be interested in innovation. They have a dual track program based on innovation and medicine. They are the best and the brightest, the people that I've met with them. We want to make sure we get our fair share of these people coming into the cardiovascular world. And several people, Huey's always ahead of the curve. He always finds resources that I don't even know exist, basically, and picks them up. So we'll talk to Huey about how we do this. They want us to spend time with them. Right now, they're in the first 2 years. They're kind of preclinical. You're going to have to pick them off before they get into the clinical environment. So spend time with them, figure out how we interact with these students. They're the ones who are going to come and run these projects with you and transform the future of healthcare. It will help build the innovation structure here in Houston, which is a lot of the focus is on this. And these are the kind of kids who are really going to be able to change things. So I'm going to close really talking about NMED. I think that is the next big thing that's really going to change what we do, and the opportunities around this are enormous. Once again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and hopefully this excites you, and we'll come back next year, and I'm going to show you that new multi-modality hybrid room, and I'm going to bring some of the NMED students, and if any of you want to see the studio in the box, come up here basically and have a look at it and figure out how we're going to test this and ship it out. Thank you very much for your attention. We're not going to take any questions, so thank you all.